The first half of 2020 saw the world change in a way that none of us could have anticipated. And as we are hopefully coming towards the end of this very, very strange time in our lives, I've been thinking about the lessons that I've learned during the last 10 weeks or more. The lessons I've learned about photography, but perhaps more importantly, the lessons I've learned about myself as a photographer. And as it's likely that those lessons will shape what I do and what this channel does in the future, I thought I'd share some of them with you. And I hope you enjoy it. On March the 14th, 2020, I put out a video talking about the fact that Spain was going into pretty much total lockdown as a result of the pandemic. And I think we were the third country in the world to take such drastic action. Of course, most other countries took similar action afterwards. Don't quote me on it being the third country, I could be wrong. At the time, I don't think I could have anticipated just how long this was going to last. The initial lockdown was for 2 weeks, and I was pretty convinced it was going to be longer than that, but here we are 10 weeks, nearly 11 weeks later, and we're still in a very, very strange situation. Over the last 10, 11 weeks, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about different types of photography, and I've learned a lot about myself and what's important to me in my photography. And I wanted to share that with you, particularly because, as I said in the intro, it will shape this channel going forwards. Now, if you're new to this channel, my normal videos are me out taking pictures. That's normally outside doing landscapes, either natural landscapes or semi-natural or even urban landscapes, but it's normally out and about doing photography. Over the last few weeks I've been doing a lot more photography inside, but if watching videos about somebody doing photography is what appeals to you, then you're in a good place. And as I said, if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe before you leave to make sure you see more of my videos. So as I said, over the last 10, 11 weeks I've learned a lot. And the first thing that I've learned is that macro photography is actually pretty hard to do. Now, I'd never really done macro photography before, and I've been using macro extension tubes with the lenses that I've got. And I must admit, I don't think the lenses that I've got are particularly good for using for macro with macro extension tubes. And that's obviously made it harder. If I was going to be serious about macro photography, I would buy a proper macro photography lens. And who knows, maybe I will. But the other thing I've learned about macro photography is that it can produce some really amazing images. In particular, some of the abstract stuff, which I've actually really enjoyed creating during this lockdown period. So macro photography is hard, but it can produce some amazing images. And that's one lesson that I've learned. The second lesson that I've learned is it pays to be prepared to not be able to go out. It doesn't have to be a global pandemic. There can be all sorts of reasons why you might have to spend some time at home. And just having a few bits of kit which maybe don't seem to be the kind of thing you would normally need to have for landscape photography can really enrich the experience. I've already mentioned macro extension tubes, or a macro lens would be better, but having something like this can be really useful to do creative stuff if you're stuck at home. As can a flash gun and a remote flash triggering system. Now, none of this stuff has to be expensive. Probably the most expensive thing in there would be a flash gun, and even those you can pick up really cheap if you're prepared to not go for the big brand names. And if you've got some of this stuff and maybe some other bits and pieces that I actually don't have, it would really make it much easier to be able to be creative and do creative things at home if you can't go out for any reason. And there may even be things that I'll be considering getting over the next couple of months in case I have to spend more time at home. That could be things like backdrops, it could be things like these kind of umbrella reflectors for the flash, it could be all sorts of bits and pieces. But having some of those bits of kit could be really useful. And just being prepared for the possibility of not being able to go out is actually a pretty good idea. The third thing that I've learned, and now we're starting to get onto the things that I've learned about myself as a photographer, rather than just things I've learned about photography. The third thing that I've learned is how important the creative element of what I do is to me. Now, a lot of landscape photographers will say that it's actually being out and about that's important, just being out in nature and exploring and being in the open air is the important thing, and actually the images are secondary. And I've always actually had kind of the same opinion. And if at the beginning of all of this you'd said to me, well, you can go out hiking and walking around as much as you like, but you're not allowed to take a single picture or make a single bit of video for the next 10 or 11 weeks, or you can't go out at all, but you can take as many pictures and make as many videos as you want at home, I almost certainly would have chosen to go out and not take any pictures. But you know what? I'm not sure that would have been the right choice, because I've come to realise that being creative is much, much more important to me than I thought. And trying out some of these new creative different ways of doing photography, like soap bubbles, like doing the macro stuff, like smoke photography, like the water splash photography. All of these things have been really important in terms of keeping me feeling creative, feeling motivated during the last 10 or 11 weeks of lockdown. On the subject of creativity, I've actually learned another lesson, and that is that I'm more creative than I thought I was. Now, I've always considered myself to be a bit of a kind of a one-trick pony. I consider myself to be, reasonably good at doing landscape photography. I may not be world-class, I may not be a master of landscape photography, but I managed to produce some nice images. But that's kind of all I do. But this lockdown period, being at home and having to find new ways to be creative, has led me to try out all sorts of different photography techniques. And in most cases, I've tried things for the first time on video and produced results that may not be the absolute best, the most fantastic, but they're not bad. And it actually has made me realise that I am more capable of different creative things than I gave myself credit for. And I'm hoping that when I'm back out doing landscape photography, that improved creativity and that improved confidence in my creativity will actually show in the images that I'm able to get, particularly in conditions that aren't perhaps ideal for landscape photography. The fifth lesson that I've learned is all about freedom. It's all about the freedom to go out and do photography whenever I want and wherever I want. That freedom is a privilege, and I didn't realise it before. The ability to do that is a privilege, and it's not something I want to take for granted in the future. And as a reminder, and I've already mentioned this in a previous video, but as a reminder not to take that freedom for granted in the future, I'm going to take 4 images that I have shot during this lockdown period, and I'm going to print them, frame them. I'm going to do something with them so that they hang on my wall as a reminder not to take it for granted. Now, I've actually already pretty much decided which 4 images, and although there were a couple of outdoor images that were kind of in my shortlist, like the image I took of the kestrel on the building over there, and like the shot of the supermoon that I did off of this very balcony, I've actually decided to make them all images that were shot inside. So one of them is my alien artifact image that I shot when I was trying to do some soap bubble photography. It wasn't an image that I expected to get. It wasn't very different to what I expected, but I really like it. Another one kind of on a similar theme is my alien life form image, which was when I was playing around with circular polarizers and plastic glasses and water and soap. One of them is from my macro challenge, and it's a really simple one. It's just some water spots on a CD shot macro with a bit of light on. And one of them, which I think is in some ways my favourite image that I've taken during these lockdown photo shoots inside, is this image of a water splash of an olive falling into a martini glass. And those 4 images in some way are going to form a collage or a set of frames or something that's going to hang on the wall to remind me not to take that freedom to go out for granted. So that's some of the lessons that I've learned from this period in history, an unprecedented period, something unlike anything I've experienced in my entire life, and I expect most people will say the same thing. What have you learned? I'd love to know what you've learned about yourself, about photography, about anything during this period. And you can let me know that in the comments down below if you want to share. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, sharing on social media. I've already mentioned leaving me a comment. And if you're not already a subscriber, hit subscribe before you leave. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you very much. I appreciate that. As always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, so thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Until the next video, bye.